Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Podcast C.S.A. for a very special episode. My name is Caroline, and I am here I'll allow him to introduce himself.
Hi, everybody. I'm Timothy Ainger. I am a clinical neuropsychologist, which is sort of a mysterious profession because we have specialty training in a couple of different arenas. So my background is I have a bachelor's degree in psychology, and then I have 2 master's degrees in clinical psychology and a PhD in clinical psychology. And what differentiates clinical psychology from psychology is it includes the academic training and the theory-based training, but also the clinical work with patients. So in doing therapy and applying theory and practices and doing assessments and learning psychometrics and actually being able to apply the practices. So it's beyond just an educator or like a book smart psychologist. It's someone who is trained to work with individuals. Then at the end of my PhD program, I did an internship in psychology and neuropsychology at the Veterans Affairs Hospital in Richmond, Virginia, Polytrauma Rehab Center. And then I did a 2-year postdoctoral fellowship in clinical neuropsychology at Cornerstone Neuropsychology, which is a Wake Forest Baptist Health affiliate. And now I'm a faculty member and clinical neuropsychologist at the University of Kentucky College of Medicine in the Department of Neurology. So it's like the title just gets longer and longer because it sort of shows where you come from.
Yes.
But in a nutshell, a neuropsychologist is someone who is trained in the clinical applications of psychology as well as how it pertains to the brain itself. So it's sort of one who examines the brain and behavior relationship and the interplay of those 2 variables back and forth. And then additionally, while I was doing that work, as those of us who've graduate trained know, you have to hustle and experience and learn everything you possibly can and get out there. So a large part of my research and training was in forensics when I was in graduate school, and I'm sort of able to parlay that now, and I do some forensics work now in addition to consulting.
Interesting.
I mean, I think so.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Especially for fans of this show. We all find it fascinating.
This is my niche right here. Yes.
Yes. Could you also talk to us about what your role as a technical advisor is for the show?
So I guess in order to sort of demonstrate how I fit into the puzzle, let me back it up and sort of talk to where my technical expertise comes from.
Sure.
So because the show is so heavily rooted in not only really neuropsychology, there's a lot of brain behavior relationship stuff, but also there's elements of trauma and complex PTSD and medicine and dissociative elements and affective concerns. Some of my research and some of my background work is in wellness, burnout, complex PTSD, and trauma, and how these variables interact with our own cognition. How does exposure to trauma, especially in the forensic population with police officers and detectives and crime scene techs and forensic anthropologists, how does the long-term exposure, the complex and vicarious trauma exposure, impact their mental state, emotional state, their burnout, their fatigue? What do we have to do to supplement their wellness? So I have this really unique niche knowledge that we've built over the years of what these variables can look like, what they manifest as, and how they can present to people, especially working in this field. So when this opportunity came up, it was just sort of a match made in heaven, in that every time we would turn a page and discuss, oh, but we want to do this with the show, I could say, well, you're not going to believe it, but I actually happen to know about that thing. So that's how we got plugged in. And my role in the show is, be very clear, I want to throw credit where all the credit is due. The writers, the writing room for this show and the EPs, they are incredible. They're on the reins of this thing. So they draft up these ideas and they'll plot out these episodes and draw out these outlines. And then they reach out to myself and some other people when they need the expertise, when they kind of have to say, all right, we want to get this square peg into this round hole. Let's make it first actually possible, and then make it look real. And then really, what is the character going to be doing? What would they be feeling? What would they be experiencing? How would they be reacting? And sometimes it's, they're just, I always throw credit back to them and say, I don't know which one of you is an expert at X, Y, or Z this week, whoever wrote this episode, but and they always say, no, we're really good at Googling, but don't let them fool you. They know what they're doing. Sometimes I feel like I'm just here to sort of polish up what they already send my way.
Yeah, we constantly on this show are just applauding the creativity and the knowledge base of these writers. Again, no idea how they're able to pull this stuff off, but they know what they're doing and you can see it.
And they really don't leave any detail unexamined. And that's the fascinating thing. The other thing that really blows my mind is verbal parsimony is not really in my wheelhouse. I can't take 100 words and make it 5.
Yeah.
And I'm amazed at what they're able to get onto the page in a line or 2 lines or in a direction, and then what the cast is able to bring out of it and put onto the screen. And sometimes I'll throw back a note and say, oh, the character should do this, that, or this is how they'd behave, or this is how a sociopath acts in this way, or whatever. And then we turn it on and I see it and I go, that is, I feel like I'm in a room with a patient. Absolutely. Yeah. So they're on it.
Exactly. Yeah. This is something that I feel like and also Angie and Jess as well, are constantly talking about with Tom, and the way that you, without even saying it, I know that you understand exactly the way, through his facial expressions, through his mannerisms, the way his voice will shake or break at different times. He gets it. And I know that he has done some of his own background research. I know that he had listened to a podcast that was done by the daughter of the smiley face killer. And he talks about how that has influenced his portrayal of Malcolm. But even beyond that, just as someone who has experienced complex PTSD myself, I see so much of myself in him and the way that Malcolm is portrayed. And it's just, they really, I mean, Tom and all of the characters really do this show justice. They do the material and the background and everything. They do it justice and they play it so well.
I mean, the amazing thing about what they're doing with, one of the topics they're addressing, which is complex PTSD, is it's complex for a reason. It has any number of variables that can play into it and any number of ways that it can manifest. So just the way that he's playing it, and I mean, I don't know from where he's drawing this source, but the way that he's presenting it and playing it, he seems to be reaching out to such a wide group of people who can latch on to 1 or 2 things that he's presenting and say, oh, this touches home with me. And I got to tell you, I mean, I'll praise every member of the cast, but I'll start with Tom and say, he's a student of the craft. And I mean, he's giving a master class. I was very fortunate. I met him one time. He had questions for me and, who's doing it right? And am I doing this the right way? And I was just in awe of, yeah, man, you're doing it right. I really don't know what to tell you. I should be recommending what you're doing to other people. So it feels like he's perpetually trying to learn and make it better and make it more realistic. And it's impressive because it seems like every week he's pulling it off more perfectly than the week before.
Absolutely. I think it's the willingness of the cast and the writers to be vulnerable and go to those places that maybe some other shows would be a little bit hesitant to. They leave no stone unturned. They leave no topic, sort of pushed under the rug or put in a corner. They're willing to go there. And I'm thankful that the fans are giving them the feedback and saying, yes, we do want you to go there.
Yes.
Because it really does. That's what makes it resonate with so many people.
I really should not be paying attention to some of the darker corners of the internet, some of the chat rooms and whatever. But every now and again, I'll get a free 35 seconds and I'll click over. And what makes me happy is when I see people who say the way that X, Y, or Z was portrayed, I feel that. I've had that, or I know that, or I get this and whatever. So it's really encouraging to see people latching onto it and feeling like they're being represented and that they're being seen. And that's also validating to know that all the work that goes into it is putting forth a genuine product.
Yes, absolutely. So to sort of switch gears a little bit.
Switch them up.
Not even. So I wanted to know how you initially came on to be an advisor for the show. Was it, one of the EPs who reached out to you, or how did you start working on Prodigal Son?
Excellent question. I was trying to figure out how I was going to answer this question because I figured you'd ask it.
Yes.
So as I know, I don't know about Angie and Jess, their background, but that graduate school is 1,000 years of painful struggle where you don't make any real money and you're drinking from the fire hose of knowledge, right?
Yes. Oh yeah.
So as I was studying this and sort of getting in my interest in whatever, speaking to a lot of colleagues and peers across the community about what things that they do and what their interests are, and one of the people who's sort of in this field with me, I actually have a cousin, and he's another technical advisor, and he works with the show as well. He for over 20 years, I think he was a homicide detective in Brooklyn, North Brooklyn.
Wow.
Our family is originally from New York, so and then when he retired officially from the NYPD, he got into advising and doing things like this, and he's worked on several shows. And for intellectual property reasons, I probably can't say what all of them are, but some major programs that people have seen. And he's a killer advisor. And I think he just sort of mentioned it to somebody because they were saying, hey, we have this show and it's about, PTSD and forensics, and there's a serial killer, and, there's a lot of psychology and he's like, hold the phone. You at least need to talk to this guy I know, and gave them my phone number. And he texted me. For years we'd been joking about like, oh, wouldn't it be fun to work in the entertainment business? But I'm, studying for my major career. And he called me and he says, you're going to get a call, answer it, talk to them, be yourself, and see if there's a match. I felt like I was on a dating game. So I spoke with the executive producers, and they sort of were pitching the premise of the show, and we had a nice long chat about it. And I guess at some point they decided I might actually have some sort of insight to contribute. And they said, okay, we were going to send you an episode and look it over and then give us some feedback. And the rest is history. So we sort of started working collaboratively ever since then.
Wow. Do you remember what episode it was that they sent you?
The pilot.
Oh, gotcha.
Yeah, they sent me, if I'm thinking back long and hard enough, they sent me the pilot with the full script to review. And I went over it, and then we had a couple long phone chats. And I think I, at one point, talked with the writer's room over a Skype meeting before we all were forced to video chat all the time. And they were actually pretty significantly into the pilot, and they kind of went, okay, you're really vibing on all the things that we want to talk about. Let's drop some notes and let's see if the show gets picked up. And if it does, and then inevitably when it did, they called me and they said, do you want to work on the show? And I said, is this a rhetorical question? Absolutely. So that's all the way back to the pilot.
Wow. I mean, you are, in my opinion, really living the dream.
I am living the dream. I am very fortunate that they are giving me the opportunity to work with them in doing this. And the show could only speak to me more if we find out in the next episode that Tom has like really bad skin and burns easily. Otherwise, So no, I'm very, very fortunate to have the opportunity to work with such incredibly creative people.
Yeah, absolutely. Perfect. So I have also seen, in a part of my little quote unquote background check.
Should I be nervous? Okay.
That you were a part of a special news report called Healing Childhood Trauma.
Yes.
Yes. Where you gave this perfect overview of the nervous system that honestly, I wish that I want to talk to all of my neuro professors and everybody and just say that, your 20 different true or false multiple choice questions could have been so much easier.
I get it. Yeah,
yes.
and part of the difficult perspective is, in order to sort of provide the knowledge at that level, you sort of have to understand it at this level, which is breaking through the ceiling and proving that this. That's the frustrating part.
Exactly. Yeah. I think that is one of the toughest things about being a clinician, is having this much knowledge, but you have people who know, maybe like the word stress, and you need to break it all the way back down. I
didn't mean to cut you off. I'm sorry.
Nope. I was going to say that is where your true, your true code switching really shines through.
Yeah, absolutely. Code switching. I mean, we don't need to operationally define code switching for your audience, right?
Yes.
Oh,
I
okay.
hope not.
Okay, good. No, so that's one of the things, one of the challenges that I really like about what I do now
Mhm.
is that there's so much science, so much research, so much neurology, so much psychology behind everything. Um, and the joke of it is like it all sort of happens up here in the black box of your head, and then it
Yeah.
spits out as a behavior.
Yep.
But the challenge, what makes it really fun for me is taking information, whether it's test findings, background history reports, etc., and integrating it, synthesizing it, and then making it digestible and accessible for the audience. And it's a great frustration when I occasionally get a referral and somebody says, I know that I'm here, but I have no idea why. I don't know what's going on
Yes.
with me. And then
Yep.
by the time that we're done, I get to see at least a little bit of awareness, or I've given them some resources where they can dig a little further. So that's one of the great, really rewarding qualities that I've been able to find in my work. But if you're doubling back to the healing childhood trauma
Yes.
piece, okay.
Yep, where you talked about, the nervous system and especially toxic stress,
Yes.
which I can tell is, I mean, you've written an article on it. This seems to be a big area of interest for you. And I was,
It's one of our, and yeah, exactly. It's sort of like my subclinical interest level. Yes.
yes, yeah. So I was wondering how, I mean, I'm assuming because of who Malcolm is as a character.
He's had a little stress.
Yes, he's had just a little, stress with multiple different things. It's almost kind of complex in a way, how it's sort of built up and it's changed over time. And I was wondering how much or how often you're consulting on Malcolm's toxic stress and even Ainsley's as well.
So I'm gonna stick a pin in the Ainsley one a little bit, just for
Sure.
the
Yep.
sake of, I know I'm gonna assume at this point in time everybody's up through episode 206.
Hmm.
And we can sort of revisit everything that's happened in the sphere of the show up until that point.
Yep.
And I'll, character development from there on out is off the table, obviously. But
Yep.
the fun thing about this, and I don't mean to make light of people who have serious traumatic issues,
Yes.
but the thing that's really a good cognitive challenge for me is that they started off with this grand idea. He's going to have these issues, X, Y, boom. And then how do we make that evolve over time? And what's amazing is just, again, the writers, the research they've put into this, what they understand, what they know. I'm taking exactly zero credit for the work that they are doing. But the way that they've had these characters evolve over time, they're following sort of the exacerbation of various symptoms and watching how, as one symptom, whether it's conscious, interact with the subconscious thing, and a physical manifestation of a psychological phenomenon, and how it sort of can erode the relationship between the two, and how that as these things compound more and more over time without release, the pressure can build, and then subconscious or repressed things can begin to manifest themselves in an uncontrolled or an
Hmm.
outward way. And I mean, I feel like they all need to be hugged. Just like, where did
Yes.
they get all of this from? Because they're doing
Yes.
it so well.
Hmm.
But there has been some talk. A lot of times they'll say, "Well, we want this character to do that or this character to that. Does this make sense?"
Yeah.
And then I go, first of all, yes, it does. You're brilliant as always. And then here's 3 paragraphs of nerd talk about why this actually makes sense. And here's the backstory, and here's this neurotransmitter that's going to interact with this way, and da 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 da. And there's been a couple points where we've kind of had to say, okay, what you're doing makes sense, but the way that you have it happening is really not the right way.
Mm.
So 3 pages of blah 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 blah, and they go, cool, we'll switch 2 words, and now it works perfectly.
Yeah.
So it's really, again, that's the level of kind of a little pinch of this on that, but really providing the extra boost of, here's why everything that you want to happen will work perfectly, and here's why that's going to happen, or here's why it actually can't work like this, or you can get it to that point, but you have to go through this pit stop to get there to make it make sense.
So I like that you are able to have this, sort of back and forth communication with the writers and say, I like where you're going. Here is one little reroute that I would take with it. And then the fact that as you've said, it's as simple for them as changing 2 words. You give them all of this and they're able to just say, oh, perfect. This is actually not a huge conundrum that we need to go back and rewrite 20 pages. We just change 2 words and perfect.
There's been a couple points where I feel like they'll send a script in various iterations, and I'll read it down, and then I'll stop and type my note, then move on to the next line and type my note. So like my notes to them actually read a lot like a conversation. Sometimes I'll say, oh, page 14, I can't believe you're going to do this. Oh, page 16, there's the payoff. Haha, good job. But there's been a couple points where they've done some kind of bigger, more technical things across the course of the season. There have been phone calls when they say, all right, we have to make this happen. What's the way? And sometimes it's been a big scene payoff, and sometimes it's been such a little, we've had 6 phone calls and it's been a 6 frame nugget. But there's the fact that I know people such as yourself and other people who are medical providers who watch the show and go, by and large, that's what it looks like. That's the way it should be. That's the right medication. That's the right procedure. Oh, he described the pneumothorax perfectly. Oh, he did that procedure the right way. Oh, that's exactly how that poisoning should look. That's, you watch television shows, and this was one of the big, I wrote notes the first time I had a full chat with the writer's room and talked to with Chris Fedak and Sam Sclaver, and they were saying, okay, we cannot teach a graduate course in every episode. We have to make it look like it's supposed to look good on TV, but also it needs to be as realistic as we possibly can get it. It needs to be digestible. And I revisit that every time I'm in my head writing a note, like, what's the way? It's not an opportunity for me to tell them why they're doing something wrong. It's an opportunity for me to go, here's how we can manifest what you have dreamt of. And by the way, they really don't come up with wrong things very often at all.
No.
And when I say wrong, I mean like, oh, you need to tweak that medication or move, whatever. But just facilitating their creative process, and the fact that they're that dedicated, because we watch shows all the time with therapy, with medical procedures, with bureaucracy, with government structure, and we being my wife and I, and we laugh and say, literally no way on the face of the planet is that legal, ethical, permissible, possible. And we watch this show and go, yeah. I mean, I get it has to work on TV, but that's it. And that's the cool thing.
Yes, exactly. That is something that, as someone who feels like they're watching so many different shows with that little like critical eye and saying, could this is a show that even when, because of all of the past shows that I've seen, even when I start thinking like, oh, are you going to do this wrong? They don't. I keep searching for something and I haven't found one huge caveat anything yet.
Excellent. That means they're doing their job right. And the thing that really is cool to me about that also, that sort of speaks to their authenticity and their dedication to it, is that every now and again, they have an opportunity for Malcolm to be fallible.
Yes.
And I don't just mean the inevitable not calling for backup part, although we all sort of love that. Yes. But when he has the opportunity to throw out that, oh, my profile was wrong, or I laid out 6.5 paragraphs of psychobabble, and it turns out there was a twist for which I had a blind spot because of my trauma, my experience, my proclivity for this and that, whatever.
Yes.
So, the forensic science as it pertains to mental health, there is science behind it. There's literature, there's research, there's analysis, but just like anything, nothing is perfect. And they really show that he's a human character and he's doing his best, but he's working through this, and he's not impervious to the ego injury, the physical injury, or even the psychological mistake. So that's really impressive to me, that they want to make him a human character.
Yeah, that's something that I've noticed and that I've pointed out in past episodes too, is that he has pitfalls, usually involving cases where the killer or something about the scene or the case touches him emotionally. We had the episode in season 1 where there was Isaac, the child, who ended up being the killer. And that was where Malcolm really turned a blind eye All Souls and Sadists. For
Yes.
some reason, I'm constantly calling it All Saints and Sinners, which I don't know where.
So in this house, we refer to it as the Halloween episode, but yes.
Yes. Perfect.
It was a really fun episode for me to work on with them, because at one point in time, I did write a paper about childhood development into adult antisocial personality disorder. And sort of, there was a point in time where I was sort of hoping to take my dissertation track into antisocial, and then I realized that was not fruitless, but that was more of a career and not a 4 or 5 year project. So I sort of had to shift gears. But I wrote some expository work and some literature reviews and put together a really complex understanding of how neurologically, behaviorally, sociologically, all these factors can contribute to sort of that adult psychopathy or the proclivity to be, dangerous and violent. And the amazing thing to me, and I think this is my blind spot, is that because this is the world that I live in, I'm jaded and I anticipate these things and these factors. And so many people who don't have the benefit or the curse of being in this world kind of go, no way that would ever happen. No way that's even possible. And no, they did it. They absolutely did it. I don't know if they ever read it, but I'm sure I sent a copy of my paper to whoever wrote that episode. I'm blanking on it right now, but beautifully written. And we went back and forth and discussed how this is, and then that plot twist, spoiler for season 1, that it was him, came out of nowhere to so many people. Meanwhile, the 1 or 2 people who have very similar, research work with me were texting me going, oh, it's the kid, right?
Yeah.
Because of A, B, and C symptoms that you guys have put out there. I'm like, okay, well, you've got it, but everybody else was kapoosh. And that's what made it so that it was very clinically and methodically laid out. I think it was a point in the show, again, that same colleague of mine, I'll have to drop her name or she'll probably kill me, and she knows how to bury a body. Dr. Amanda Farrell. She texted me because she was live watching it, and the scene where Malcolm burst into the interview room with the bag, she said, oh, the bunnies are in the bag, right? And I was like, yeah, there you go. So just the fact that they said, is this, I have a feeling this is possible, let's make it possible. And even if it's people aren't going to get it, that's okay. We're going to be true and authentic, but people got it. And even if they didn't believe it at first, everything that they put out there is legitimate. They do not, make up stuff and make fake diagnoses and whatnot. That kid, and kudos to that actor.
Oh yeah.
Who knocked it out of the park.
Yes. Made it so believable, and honestly threw me for a loop too. The twist was a twist for me. And I feel like it was because I was on Malcolm's side through this whole thing. Like, this poor kid, the father figure in this, I don't really like him. He seems kind of, interesting.
Right.
And then it was that funny part when Malcolm goes back to the cage, and I felt like just like smacking myself off the head, because I was like, the McDonald triangle, like the cruelty to animals and all. And so I saw that and I was like, this show, like, really threw me.
How many times are you and I going to say that we speak the same language? The McDonald triangle, exactly. Yes, the McDonald triad. And so there's been some sort of fairly more recent work that has said, okay, well, there's one point in this triad that we sort of need to throw out a little bit, but those other two, they hold. But the fact that McDonald triad is still in the zeitgeist enough that people recognize it, I mean, you saw it exactly right.
Yeah, that continues to be my favorite episode, and to the, I think, sort of shock of a lot of my other fellow fans who really love. I mean, I'm sure that in your research on me, you might have seen that I and Angie and Jess, we love Malcolm and Danny. And so,
you guys are Brightwell shippers.
Yes.
Is that the word I'm supposed to use? Is it Brightwell shippers?
Perfect lingo. Yes.
I'm not cool, so I had to listen to a few episodes to make sure I was saying it right. And I see it come up on the Twitter every now and again. And I know that I sound 1,000 years old saying the Twitter, but I feel like Brightwell shipper is the term I'm supposed to use. So literally, no comment on that, but I appreciate your enthusiasm.
Yes. So I feel sort of like I'm betraying them, because most people's favorite episode, at least for season 1, was the trip, which was sort of the beginning of this whole ship ball rolling.
Let's throw axes.
Yes, exactly. But my favorite episode continues to be the Halloween episode. I prefer that title because of that twist and because that was just so perfectly done. That hit all of my favorite, forensic profiling, bullets right on the head. I mean, it just, everything about it was, it was that, to use another millennial term, it was chef's kiss perfect. Just
Wow. I just
yes.
taught my almost 7-year-old what that meant just this morning. So yes.
Yes.
I feel I feel dirty trying to pick a favorite episode. Well, first of all, I don't want to take ownership and say they're like my children, but I'll say it's like picking your favorite cousin or something like that, because
Perfect. Yeah.
these episodes belong to the writers.
Yes.
So I'm just on the outside helping. But that is All Souls and Sadists is one of my favorite episodes, especially in the first. You have to bifurcate season 1 into part 1 and part 2, basically.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
I really also like Q&A.
Yes.
The back and forth and the interplay. And the procedure, big fan of the procedure as well.
Oh yeah.
But when we start to see things about Ainsley in that episode, but what Tom did in Alone Time and Silent Night in that arc, I'm just going to start naming every episode now. So let's just say all episodes are my favorite for different reasons.
Yeah, absolutely. Because every single episode has some sort of interplay with neuropsychology in it and just the way that it manifests itself. And I think that that is very telling to go back to the show, for Malcolm as well, who has from the get-go as a child seen something incredibly traumatic. And now he decides to go into a career where that, really isn't going to go away. He's involving himself, and for, I guess, an honorable reason, as he goes on to tell us in the episode. I'm blanking on the title, but it's the one, Internal Affairs, where he, has the conversation with the psychiatrist, which I am
another great plot twist episode.
Yes, that was also another plot twist that I was not picking up on. But again, the writers, all of you, looking
there's a really interesting character trait that that Malcolm has that I think is very similar to what a lot of and I'll tell you, like, my colleague and I were doing this wellness and burnout research for years. Yes. And then, like you said, wham, we all got COVIDed, and all of a sudden the spotlight is like, hey, what are the resources? And we're going, we better really start making this accessible quickly, because people are going to. So I have to brag on my colleagues here at the College of Medicine. There's a colleague of mine who has started a department wellness committee. And then we've actually been running some studies about the impact of burnout and fatigue on providers in multiple different divisions of the hospital and disciplines of medicine, so we can better understand what contributes to provider burnout, and then helping to take that sort of responder vicarious trauma that you talked about and putting that out into firefighters, paramedics, etc. But the other element of that, and I'll come back to the Malcolm character trait, is that saying things like, okay, well, we need to talk about vicarious trauma for forensic providers, and instinctively people think of detectives, police officers. But now we need to widen that into crime scene techs, analysts, lab techs, morgue techs, pathologists, interpreters, cleanup crew. Anybody who's remotely associated with a violent or traumatic incident has the potential to be exposed to trauma. So when you think about it from that perspective, it really widens the catchment net of what we need to be able to provide. Yeah. But the character trait that Malcolm has from such an early age is that he sort of is he's very drawn to that which traumatizes him. Yes. And there's some really interesting psychology behind this. And I'm just going to go ahead and assume that the writers already were doing this, and we're just, but the one theory of that sort of keep your friends close and your enemies closer, if he gets right up next to it and plays an active part in sort of perpetuating it, it never has a chance to be stagnant and really manifest. And that's why he sort of yearns for cases and murders, because if he can continue needling it, it never has a chance to sit still within him. Yes. And we see, even in the very amusing episode beginnings where he sort of is going about his daily routine, doing his yoga, whatever, the things that we would all do to sort of relax and de-stress, you can tell Tom and Malcolm have this sort of, they just seem on edge because they're not, like, they have to sit with themselves. They're
Yes.
forced to think about, and they can't distract themselves by being close to it. And it seems paradoxical, but it's very, very much what we see in a lot of providers who go home and feel upset, depressed, on edge, but feel better when they're back in the arena where they
Yes.
are in a heightened sense of awareness and they are experiencing that adrenaline rush. And it makes no sense until you've lived that experience, and then you can
Yes.
get it.
Yeah.
Look at Malcolm, who needs a case and needs a murder because that's what he thinks makes him level-headed.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
he's barreling towards disaster.
Especially now that we know that he has not been going to therapy for quite a while. I mean, I am just, that is constantly bugging me, and just thinking this poor guy needs to really sit down with a therapist and just get all of this out.
You mean you don't think the forensic setting group therapy one session was enough for him?
I think it is beneficial, but it is not completely what he needs. It is a very, I will call it a waterproof Band-Aid
Oh,
compared
that's
to,
good.
yes, compared to what he really needs. He
And we have
needs
used
like
that before. We
gauze.
said kind of Band-Aid on the dam or finger in the dam. It's not really, it's not the solution.
No, yeah, because most Band-Aids, they fall right off the second that you even touch hand sanitizer or even go near it. So no, it's a waterproof Band-Aid, but what he needs is perfectly wrapped gauze with some very nice medical tape, and like a nice little cushion and some very good quality TLC from an approved provider.
Oh, how good was Malcolm's therapist though?
So that was also something I wanted to get your opinion on.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So what do you think of Gabrielle?
Um, Therapy is tough to put in front of people because therapy is different for every person.
Oh, yes.
So there's as many different ways that you can represent therapy as you can represent people on the planet. So inevitably, whatever they do in the room, in that situation, face to face, is going to strike a chord with someone, and somebody else is going to say, that's not what therapy looks like. Um, and we sort of danced around this and said, well, this is interesting because she's got all the toys and she's been seeing him forever. Is she a lifespan therapist? Is she a pediatric therapist? And really what it comes down to is the crux of therapy, the real impactive mechanism, is the relationship that the patient has with the provider.
Yes.
So we're going to go out on a limb and say the magic of television is that for their relationship, she made an exception and just became his lifespan therapist. But a lot of the insight, you need a therapist and a client to be a really good match for each other. And their interactions, his physical presence in the room, she was able to deconstruct him. He was able to get comfortable very quickly. I mean, that comes from knowing each other for 20 plus years.
Yes.
But he walks in the room and gets instantly comfortable and able to discuss elements of himself. And she really pulls from some genuine psychoanalytic. She peppers in a little Jungian. There's a little family systems that gets in there. And it really sort of the insight-based therapeutic practice that plays to him. He would not be the type of person who would take well to a cognitive behavioral approach because
Oh
he would be
God,
trying
no.
to outwit it right at every possible
Yes.
turn.
Yep.
So he needed to be provided with an opportunity to analyze and scrutinize and sort of unveil different personality characteristics. And that's what she really was able to provide. She was that tabula rasa and that sounding board that he could give to him, or that she could give to him. And that's, I liked it. I think sometimes you see therapy on TV and it's used as a gimmick, or it's used as, oh, we're going to plow through a trope and fix your problem in 15 seconds. And it was very clear that she could sense he had 75 layers of pain and that it was not going to be fixed anytime soon. But he accepted that that was a safe relationship. And I think that the way they played it was very realistic. If one's going to push, the other's going to shove. And that's the way I think the scene that you're thinking of is the same one that I'm thinking of. And if I remember, it's the one where he receives the advice and then leaves her office, and we do a musical montage of him walking down the street trying to be chipper and upbeat and scaring everybody. And he bumps into Eve and they plan the date. Yeah, it was beautiful. And to again praise the cast, but to praise Tom, the way that he played uncomfortable with happy in that scene, and the way that you could see him walking down the street going, oh, I have to show a positive emotion. What's a way that an awkward child would try to smile? And it was, we were rolling at how well he played it.
Human.
I'm going to get Angie and Jess very excited when I say this, and this is not any type of spoiler. I just feel like I should throw them a bone on this. But you know, everybody in his life, his own family is generally kept at arm's length, but for some reason he reaches out and he has such a good working relationship with someone else who has such a personal experience with trauma. And that's why when he and Danny are interacting with each other, I really should say when the actors and actresses are working together, but the characters will say,
Yes.
They play so well, and their scenes together. And I can't imagine the amount of work that those two performers had to put in to get to that relationship. But the way that they play off each other is so understanding and compassionate, and so much is said when nothing is said.
Yes.
That it really shows that there's something there. And even if it's not a romantic relationship, which will break a lot of people's hearts if it's not, I don't know, maybe it is, maybe it isn't. But there's something in just their relationship that they get each other on some level and they can continue to function.
Yes, they can be very personal with each other. And especially after the trip when Danny told a little bit about her past and everything that she went through, and that Malcolm was so understanding of it. And the way that their relationship, platonic or not, has built off because of that. If he's not going to therapy at this point, I'm glad that he can be honest with somebody.
Right.
Yes.
Right. And that he has such a great father figure too. And I don't mean Michael Sheen, although I love Michael Sheen. Yes. And I'm stealing his fashion. I bought, a cardigan I want to be like, but in what Lou Diamond Phillips is doing in that role, to be that father figure that that Tom's character has needed, and he can be that accessible, and he can be literally on call for him. I mean, rarely do I see an ensemble cast where the episode can shift so significantly and so quickly, and you're just enmeshed in personal versus crime of the week. And they can do that, snap your fingers, and you're totally bought in. There's no setup needed. It feels like you're interacting with a good friend. But watching the way that the characters are playing the shift between the personal and professional, and they're getting the vibes of, I've worked on a team with you for 5 years. I know when something's up. I know when what's going on. And I mean, these guys have known each other for 2 years, and they're acting like they've been working major crimes for a decade.
Exactly. Yep. And it's a credit to the actors and the actresses that they are able to show that to us so well. Yes, absolutely. So in terms of you being a technical advisor, I'm curious if you tend to get consulted more on the cases and the killers, or is it more the personalities of the characters and, their behavior and their mindsets? Where do you say you generally tend to give more feedback?
The answer is yes.
Perfect.
So the relationship, the way that we operate back and forth is I receive a copy of this, really an outline first. And they sort of say, okay, this is where we're going to go. Would you look at the outline? Tell us if we're sort of headed in the right direction. And sometimes it'll be say, oh, we really want to make this happen and that happen. Then the script will come and I'll read it down. And I have taken the approach, and hopefully this is the way, I mean, it seems to be working. Hopefully this works for them too. But I will read it through, and then just whatever's happening on the page, I'll give them my thoughts, my rationale for that, etc. Sometimes that takes the shape of, oh, what you're doing here, this character should be played in this way. This is how this emotional reaction should look. Or because he doesn't have the capacity for this particular emotion, the lines need to be delivered in this way. Sometimes the feedback is, ooh, that word doesn't jive with his knowledge level, his education. That's not a word that people in this arena really typically use. Here's a catchphrase that a lot of people pick up on. Here's a buzzword that people use, etc. Sometimes it takes the direction of a writer will reach out and say, hey, I'm writing an episode a couple weeks in advance. Here's what I'm thinking. Let's spitball some ideas, and does this play, does that play? And then even on another time, it's just taken on a pure technical. We want this medication to play. We want this mechanism to work. Is what we're going to do physically possible? Is what we're going to do medically possible? We want Adrisa to drink from the poisoned glass at the funeral home hotel. Right.
Yes.
Okay. How do we walk that back and make that work? And what will she have on hand? And what'll right. And it's just a highly technical, so it ranges. And it's a really good challenge for me. I don't pretend to know everything, not even remotely close. But knowing sort of where my background is coming from, I feel like I'm able to sort of reach out and organize the thoughts and information for them a little bit better to support them into getting where they want to go faster than if they were just, and also sort of going, okay, I know Google says this, but in reality, that's what this means. So it depends. I'm always happy to offer, and we did spend a lot of time early on really building the character traits and the personality profiles and sometimes I read a script and I go, you don't need me because you've done it for a year and a half and and you've nailed it. And I get very scared that they're just going to say, all right, thanks, and we're going to, we're done. But just it speaks to, again, the strength of that room and how well they've really been able to put together the complex characters. So it's whatever they need, I'm here for them.
Do you feel like you have done more with this season compared to the last season?
It's hard to say. I'd like to say that I'm putting the same amount of energy into it, which is 100%. Yes. But I think the real answer is the two seasons are very differently flavored. It's like one season is a beef dish and one season is a chicken dish. And you can't say that you're putting the same type of prep work into it. The first season had one very clear overarching plot line and then subplots that played in and out of it and character development, and boom. And then the second season, the big reveal at the end of season one, how does that play? And then what's the new progression and evolution of that psychological trauma? And now that we know more people have deeper complex issues, how do we peel that back and dig into a little bit deeper? So I don't think it's one season was more, one season was less, because they're so different. And again, no spoilers, this season's not over yet. So I can't really say whether or not there's more work or less work to come. Let's just say we're halfway there. Just in case the writers of the EPs are listening to this, I'll just say, just have faith in them. That's all I'm going to say. Just have faith in them.
Oh yeah, 100%.
Really, the fun. So I'm going to tease my wife a little bit, who I should preface by saying she's smarter than I am in every stretch of the imagination. She, very early on, when we started this process, I said to her, do you want to sort of talk, that you have any interest in this? She goes, I'm all in on the show. I don't want to know a single thing about it. Don't say a word. I want to be. And so we watched the first episode and she said, okay, tell me what happens. And I said, no. You wanted nothing to do with it. So the entire first season, watching it develop, watching it play, oh, how much trouble I was in Christmas 2019 when we took that break and Malcolm was in danger and we were traveling to New York and she's, what's happening? What's going on? I sorry, you wanted nothing to do with it. So when we got to the end of the season one reveal, man, was I in trouble. But the cool thing is, I imagine it was like what people felt when they watched The Sixth Sense. And I say I imagine because The Sixth Sense was spoiled for me and I'm still bitter about it. I know.
I'm so sorry for you.
Like opening weekend for a guy who had a burgeoning, interest in psychology. I went into school on Monday and my friend said, oh, well, I won't even spoil it now, but he said, oh, well, here's the plot twist. And I was like, well, there goes that. But where I'm getting is, my own trauma aside, when you see that incident at the end, and I'm being very careful just in case nobody's seen it. I don't know who wouldn't, but you see that happen at the end of the first season. And then you go back and you go, wow, they really kind of dropped the breadcrumbs for this the
Yes.
whole way through.
Yeah.
But where were we? We were so deep in these other things and that's when you realize, oh no, this has so many levels of complexity, and they have fleshed this thing out.
Yes. Yeah. And I know that you had said earlier to put a pin in the whole Ainsley thing, to which I'm reeling myself in, because you're
I'll
right.
just say this.
Yep.
Ainsley may or may not be in future episodes. They may or may not address that plot line. There you go.
Okay. Because
but credit where credit is due to Miss Sage, because and I've not met her, so I will say Miss Sage. I hope to, because she's amazing. But the way that she is playing the heck out of this character,
it's unbelievable.
Well, everybody on this cast, and I mean, I did not know her work before seeing this show, and I was sort of like, oh, I hope she does okay. I mean, how much time do we get to watch TV in graduate school? I didn't know her work. I knew Ms. Young's work. I should say Ms. Young, but I, go back and see her on Broadway in The Life in sort of like the mid to late 90s. I mean, ever since then, when I was a very brief theater geek, and I was, I could sing you that soundtrack right now, and just going like, I'm going to follow that. And when I saw that she was on board with this, I said, well, this is top-notch casting. And she's, everybody's killing it. What can I say?
All right. Yeah. To sort of wrap things up, I have some rapid fire questions for you.
Oh boy. Okay.
These are very similar to the ones that Angie asked Nathaniel Bloom, but I have varied a couple to fit you personally.
You're testing my response inhibition is what you're testing. Okay.
Exactly. There you go. All right. Last book that you read?
The Tao Te Ching by Lao Tzu.
Very interesting answer. I never would have. Great answer.
Sorry.
No, that's perfect. All right. Favorite movie?
Oh, God. Ghostbusters.
The original?
Absolutely.
All right.
I have no problems with the remake, but
the
original, those are my psychologists. That was, probably the first movie I saw in movie theaters as a kid. So yeah, Ghostbusters.
Favorite sports team?
University of Tennessee Volunteers, all sports. Individual sports, Baltimore Orioles baseball.
Awesome. Clinical or research work, or should I say academic work?
If anyone that I work with is listening, academician, but clinical.
All right.
Good question.
Marvel or DC?
I just finished the Marvel movies. That's how far behind I am. They were my treadmill watching. I just finished Endgame a week ago, and then we plowed through WandaVision. So Marvel.
Yeah, I've yet to watch WandaVision. Every time a new episode comes out, I know that I need to finally pick up on this show, but I think that
they're phenomenal. But in case anybody's wondering, just you can't watch WandaVision if you haven't watched basically all the other ones. But
yeah, that's the thing, is you need to do that, like, more than a Lord of the Rings marathon. You need to do that week-long marathon of every single movie in order to get just a fraction of any of the spin-off shows.
We got the treadmill, I put the TV down there, we hooked up the streaming, and I just walked my way through the Marvel universe.
Coffee or tea?
Both. Coffee.
Nicholas Endicott or John Watkins?
That's a good question.
Yeah.
My wife has peeked her head in the door and she's trying to answer it as well. She says Watkins, I say Endicott, but that might only be based on the fact that I know Dermot Mulroney plays the cello.
There's the actor's name.
There's the actor, yes.
Perfect. Again, I want to thank you so much.
My pleasure.
This has just been an awesome, we were talking shop. We were, as Martin says, we were talking turkey. It was
right.
Yeah. It was perfect. Thank you so much for this
Absolutely,
opportunity.
my pleasure. You guys love the podcast. I should not say you guys. That's not proper. You people, you everyone, you ladies, however anyone identifies. But again, big hi to Angie and Jess. And if you guys need anything else, if there's anything else comes up, just please give me a holler. This was a blast. Absolutely a blast.
Absolutely. Yeah, this was definitely for me a once in a lifetime kind of interview, and I would love to do it again,
Stop.
especially after we get more info on Ainsley, because I have just so many questions about that character that we can.
I'm scoffing. I'm not scoffing at Let's Do It Again. I'm scoffing at Once in a Lifetime. I have never been described as Once in a Lifetime, and I think I'm only coming off that way is because you don't know me that well. But we will. I'm more than willing to get to know you guys a little bit better as the show goes on, and hopefully, we'll get a couple more seasons to really play this out.
Yep. We're gonna manifest it. We're not gonna talk
Whiteboard
about.
it. We're gonna
Yep.
put it out there.
Exactly. Yep. Gonna make a big, huge poster, hang it over my ceiling, over my wooden ceiling. Look at it every night. Yep.
All the hashtags, renew Prodigal Son, hashtag Prodigal Son, etc.
Yes.
Put it out there in
Exactly.
the universe.
Yep. And that's for everybody who's listening or watching. Please use all the hashtags. Please give this show the attention that it so badly deserves.
Absolutely.
All right. And we're going to leave it at that. We will see you guys for the next episode. And thank you again, Dr. Ainger, for joining us.